This is a continuation in the model design video where I started the design of the view models that I'm going to use to drive the creation of this part of the application. That's the transaction head setup and the transaction subhead setup. So for these two implementations, I am going to need these three structures that I'm going to explain here, these four structures. Now, let me start with the most bottom one, the one that can stand alone. This value description DTO VM view model, I just use VM to mean view model, contains essentially three fields: the ID, code, and description. Now, I use it in any place I need to display essentially code and description. For example, let me show you this part of the application. In order to drive this kind of drop downs, code description drop downs, I'm using that structure. So instead of creating different structures for just this simple display of code and description, I use this value description DTO here, and my intention is to use it to capture this area of the data entry where we pick the chart of account. So this is the area I want to use it to drive, and that is why it is used in the chart view model. Now, the chart view model is essentially the view model that is going to assist in implementing this part of the application. That's why we have the economic drop down, the fund drop down, the function, program, and queue. And if you look here, you will see that we have the economic all the way down to the 5 segments required. And we have the list, because for every UI view model that requires a drop down, there's going to be a combination of the value at the end of the day and the list part of the drop down. So you can see there's a corresponding field for the value of when you select the economic object and the list of the drop downs that will be displayed. So this is a combination of them, and each one has its corresponding properties at the end of the day. So let's pick the economic. First of all, I have the field, the property called economic, and like I told you, each one is a combination. When you define the field, then you define the property. So, for example, this is the property for the economic description. So, it is just have that in mind at the end of the day. Then we have what we're going to use to populate the drop down, which is also a structure that has its field and its corresponding property. So always have that at the back of your mind. But that particular field for the list of the drop down, we must decorate it with a browsable equals to false attribute. This will ensure that it is not visible only when the drop down has been clicked. What I mean is that if we don't decorate it with that attribute, it is this list will now form part of the UI. So it is because we have essentially said that we don't want to make it a browsable property. That's why it's not showing until it's dropped down. So in order to implement a drop down, you need the field and the list that will form the drop down of that field. So this is the view model that I am going to eventually use to capture this picking of the chart. And the next thing is the view model that forms the transaction head. Uh, it's a simple one, just the code and the description, and a list of subheads that the transactions, the subheads under that head. Now, this type of definition of view model is what is going to facilitate this type of UI. Let me show you in payables where we have a header and the details. So in this case, you can map it to the head and the list of subheads under the head. So that is the reason why we have defined this model, which is the transaction head model, to contain a list of subhead view models. Now, you can see we didn't decorate it with browsable equals to false because indeed we want it to show up just like this. That's just like this, where we will have the head information and all the list of subheads under it. So that is the transaction head. Then the subhead itself contains also the code, the description, and a pointer to the head it belongs to. Remember, a pointer to the head it belongs to, then a pointer to the chart that was selected. So essentially what we're doing is that we're trying to model the UI as close as possible. It is very likely at the end of the day that the usage of this might be changed at the end of the day because we have already said that the transaction head contains the subheads. So, but it's likely this will still evolve. But essentially, I feel that with these four classes of business objects, and please, very importantly, when you are defining your domain models or your business objects, you must put them inside the business objects folder for it to be visible and have meaning for the application. So essentially, this with these four classes, I believe that we can actually implement this functionality uh, uh, well. So, and one thing is, immediately you define this your business objects and you compile the application, there is this concept of the framework they call the application model. So what happens is that for each of these business objects, the framework is going to create three views perspective for you. The one that involves a list of the business object, the one that involves the detail of that business object, and the one that involves the lookup for that business object. So how do we see these views? You click on the application model, and I need to explain the fact that when I created this project, I created it solely to be a web project. Don't forget, Devexpress is a cross-platform. This framework is cross-platform in the sense that, let me show you another project. This is another project I developed with the framework, but it has a Windows desktop part of it and a web part of it also. So the framework comes with a generic module, which is where anything you drop here is available to both the web and the desktop version. Anything you do in this module. So this is generic module. And if you now want to customize for the web, you do it here. So anything you do here is not going to be available in the Windows platform aspect of it. Just like anything you do here in the Windows is not going to be available in the web platform of it. And these two projects are actually the hosting projects for all these other implementation. So this is the cross-platform part of the application. This is the customization of the web part of the application. This is the customization of the Windows part of the application. That's why you have .win, .web, and this is the hosting application. This is actually the Windows Forms application, and this is the Windows Desktop application. So they are referenced there. So if I go to the AGAS portal itself, I didn't bring the desktop part of it because AGAS itself is, this project is all about converting the existing desktop to the web. So that's why when I was creating the project from start new, I only added the one that had the web customization. So if I want to, I can do all my customization in this part. But I know that maybe in the future I might want to do something from the desktop point of view. That's why I'm still doing a lot of things here in this part. So now I've opened the application model for the project. And I just want to show you that if you come now, this is, in software development, most frameworks have the top level object as the application. So when you do application dot, you can now start navigating downwards. So this is exactly the same thing, but instead of using code to do the customization, they're giving you a intuitive UI view to be able to customize different properties of the application. For example, I just told you now that once you've created a business object, the framework, once you build those business objects, the framework creates 3 views per object. Now, let me show you. I created those views in the cash book module. So you can see it. It has created the transaction head model. This is the list view. This is the detail view. This is the lookup view. Then I created the chart. Sorry, let me build the project again. Function F6. Okay, go back here. So, um, I, oh, sorry. Okay, I've seen the problem. I was looking for the transaction subhead view model. So instead of dropping it in the, I'm supposed to have dropped it in the cash book view, and I'm going to change the namespace to rhyme with the namespace of the transaction head. Now, once I do that, I come function F6 to build again, and I go back to the application model view. Yes, so this was what I was looking for. From at least that small aspect, you will see that this thing is organized. It groups objects, the views, it groups them by namespace. So if I want everything, anything that I want to come under this node now, I have to put them under this namespace. So you can see it has done three views for each. This is the one for the head, the detail view, the list view, and the lookup view. Now, for the head, since it contains a list of subheads, because the head contains a list of subheads that is browsable, the system has already created a lookup list view, a list view that unifies the subhead inside the detailed view of the head. This will become, you will understand it better when I show you the view later. So, but ordinarily, if we didn't have that list, the list of subhead in the transaction head view model, it will have just been three. One, two, three, just like this is one, two, three. So it is every view model that is a standalone has three views that will be created automatically by the framework. And that is what has been done here. So you can see these are the two view models that of concern. That is, we're going to build the application based on this view model. So the first thing is, let me start by, I want to bring in a node under cache books. Instead of listing the items straight, what I want to do, which is now I want to set up transaction head setup. Let me call that transaction head setup. I want to have a parameters node inside the cache book node. Then it is inside that one I'm going to now have the node. So let me show you what I mean. I'm going to go to that same application model, go to navigations, go to items, and I will go to cache books, go to the items in cache book, and I'm going to now add a navigation item. I'm going to call it parameters. Then let me use the ID, a meaningful ID. Let me call it cache book parameters. So inside this one now, I can now have the one that will now say transaction head setup. Call it. So now when you click on it, I want to display the transaction head list view. Remember, it's the list view I want to display once that is done. So now I'll go to function F6, and I will just click on anything. It's going to log me out and log me back in. I will now log back in. So I log back in. So you can see that's added it parameters transaction head setup. So now it's showing an empty list. Of course, nothing is happening. So and just by defining these things, these are the things the framework has already done. And if I click new here, you can see it has brought me to this interface where it is already wired up to display the head information and the list of subhead. So this is how the UI is going to be driven. It is from here we are going to do. But what I want to do now is this. I don't want um, this part to show when I'm creating a new head. I want the this part, I want this view to be available when the head is already created, so that when I want to now create subhead of a particular head, I will have selected it, then this view can come up. So I am not going to use this view for the new aspect of creating the the transaction head. I'm going to use another view. And how do I do that? I want to come here. I'm going to come here. Now this is the detail view that is showing up here now. So this is what the detail view looks like. So by default, clicking on the new of a screen of a particular view model takes you to a detailed view of that model. So right now, I'm going to clone this one, and I'm going to call it new transaction view model detail. Let me remove the copy. So now I have the one I want to use. So, but how do I now make? I want to make it in such a way that once I click this new, instead of showing this model, it should show this one that I just did. And in that one, I am now I'm going to do what? I am going to come to this part of it, the layout, and I'm going to tell it that I want to customize. I don't need this aspect of it to show up. I only need the code and the description. So what I want to do now is I'm going to control this view. I'm going to control this view so that I can intercept this button from creating the default one and it displays mine. So how do I do that? I come here. I'm going to create a controller for the transaction head view model. Now, watch the naming convention. I'm going to control because the word now is control. I need to make sure that I intercept this new button. So I'm going to create a controller that does just that. So I'm going to come to the controller folder of the cache book. This is where I created the models. But now I'm creating the controller here. So I come here, call it create a view controller. And what I want to control is the transaction made view model, but the list view, because this interface is a list, it listed. So it's the list view that I want to control. So it is important we have that naming convention in place. Transaction head view model is the name of the business object I want to control is list view. So I just put controller there, list view. So if I want to control the detail view, I'll do a detail view. So I click OK. Now, by default, this is what it creates. It uses a class that inherits from view controller. Let me close this. But what I want to do is you have to be sensitive to this. So I'm going to go into one of the existing customizations I did, and this one was for the payables module. But instead of inheriting from the normal view controller, I wanted to inherit from object view controller with a list view, and I am talking about the transaction view model business object. So the list view of the transaction view model business object. So just remember that. And by doing that, the icon disappears for the controller. Normally it will have come with a designer, but because I've distorted the view controller inheritance, so it has changed to a normal class view, but there's no problem. So that is the first thing. So what do we want to do? I said I want to intercept this new button. So what I need to do now is that I'll still go back to the code I used, and there's this object that is called new object view controller. This is an interface into this new button. Now, one of the things I'm going to do is that because we're doing open close principle, um, your view controller must be specific to what view are you trying to control. If you don't make it, if you don't scope it, let me use the word scoping, you will be shocked that most of your views will just be picking up the code from your controller. So you have to be very, very careful to specify that these properties, they are, once you inherit from object view controller, automatically the class has these properties. Now, the first thing is we want to make sure that this thing only works with objects of this type, which is the head view model, and it only works with view model that are list views of that type. So just these three lines in combination with the fact that I have already spelled it out here too, we make sure that any code I'm writing in this controller is only mapped to this view and any other no other view. So what do I want to do? I want to, in once the, let me copy this, then I will explain it. what I want is, I think I can even take it straight since it's the only code that is here. I just want to make sure that once this view is activated, because that is when this event will fire. Once this the framework sees all these things in place, virtual of us loading this interface, then this activate event will automatically fire. And what do I want to do? I want a handle into that new, and I want, this is a way of telling the system that anytime you click that button, run this code, as this event will fire. So now I am going to, this is where I am going to open the view that I'm interested in opening, right? So I'm coming here. So I want to create an object of still of this type, which is the transaction head, and object space for it. And I want to create the object, and I want to open the one I call new view model detail view. If you remember very well, that was the detail view I created when I cloned the default one. So now this is the code that intercepts that call and now opens now opens the view that I'm interested in. Let's run it and see. Log you out. So you can see now that now I have only the um, only the transaction head showing there. So let me do some small customization by saying that, okay, here I want it to be transaction head setup instead of view model. So I'll go back to, your guess is as good as mine, the application model interface. Then I go to that view, and this is the caption. So I can just say transaction head setup. Function F6. So, so the next thing we're going to now do is I'm going to put a button on this view here, right? And that button, you're going to use it to save. Once you click it to save, it's going to save all your information here through the presenter, and from there it is going to go into the next view. So let me just go ahead and do that. But before we get to that aspect, we need to set up the presenter for the because don't forget, we are not going to write the code to create. We're going to leverage on the presenters that has already been created. So the presenter to do that is this. It was under cache book, and there's the cache book parameter set of presenter. Now, once you have located the presenter, I want to show you the stereotype things that you need to do. Probably to further understand, you need to go and get accustomed with the presenter pattern. But once you have located the presenter, you need to copy the view interface and go to this folder that I have created called the presenter views, and I have the cache book on there. You right click, you click on add class, and you put the name there, remove the I for the interface, and you click on add. So the name of the class is going to be the name of the presenter interface without the presenter view interface without the I. You declare it as public, then you will now inherit from that same interface and you resolve it. Then you implement all its interface. Now, I am going to pause this video here. By the time I get back, I will have done essentially this thing I will do here now, which is for each property, I am going to define a mirror property and put underscore in that name. And I am going to, if it is a set, I'm going to take the one I defined, put it here and equals it to value. Let me do this so that you get it again. It is a set it, don't forget the underscore. It is a get, paste it there. It is a set, it's like that. So that is how I'm going to do it for all these properties. And at the end of the day, we're now going to use it. Once I've defined this, then we can now start building the controllers and hooking them up to the presenters. So I am going to pause the video here, and in the next video, hopefully we will have completed this aspect of it. Then we can now start hooking up our controllers to the presenters. So the whole idea is that the controller is what is going to be the unification point of our business objects and the presenters that is already existing. So see you then.